I'm Averie.
And I'm Mel.
This is the Veda Lounge Podcast.
All things Vedic, cosmic, and magic.
For yoga teachers, entrepreneurs, creatives, and coming back to your own center.
We explore themes on living like you practice to knowing your nature.
Join the conversation for an embodied homecoming to illuminate your radiance.
Through getting nerdy with Vedic sciences and self-discovery, cozy into your cosmic cadence. Welcome back to the Veda Lounge Podcast. We are so excited to be here today. It's Mel here.
Hello, and it's Averie.
And we are with a very special guest today. If you are part of the Mel Marie Yoga community, you know her very well. You see her in classes, and we felt like it made total sense for you guys to really have this opportunity to get to know Eva. She has been a right-hand piece of everything with Mel Marie. She has been with Mel Marie Yoga since the very beginning as far as San Antonio goes, and has witnessed every texture of evolution, growth, pull back, pull forward, all the edges and all the things. And it just feels like a really sacred honor to have her here in general, because she is so deeply involved and part of the foundation that everything we are doing here is. So without further ado, Eva, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and welcome. Thank you for being here.
Oh my gosh. There's so much to the story of how we connected. So when you and I met, I was a nurse. I was working in the ICU. We had moved from Michigan to Texas about, I don't know, I want to say maybe 9 years before that. And there was so much change, so much weight, so much different in my life. And a lot of those things were fantastic. A lot of those things were wonderful. I did not start out with fabulous coping mechanisms. Anything negative, just like shove it down, don't talk to it, don't acknowledge it, suck it up and drive on. A whole lot of, this is just not stuff that we acknowledge, or it was fuel, right, for other people. So I got to a point in my life where I noticed there was no joy. I wasn't happy. I wasn't challenged. I wasn't having those real deep conversations, where you go to a bar with your friend and you sit there for like 2-3 hours and you're just talking about anything and everything. Those conversations weren't happening in my life. And it made me look at all of the different areas of my life and what was sparking joy and what wasn't. I knew I needed more. So one of the things that I had contemplated on and off for many years was becoming a yoga teacher. But as you guys know, I am not a bendy person. I've had scoliosis since the age of 12. I wore a back brace for 5 years that kept my body in very rigid positions. And that left a mark on my body. And I think a lot on my soul too, right? Like it left its energetic imprint on my body. It was all that holding on. I decided, okay, screw it. I'm gonna find a way to become a yoga teacher. And I'm gonna look for somebody that I can, and this is the funny part, this is the intention there. I want somebody that can be my mentor for the rest of my life, somebody that I'm gonna have a deep relationship with. And I sent off emails to all of the yoga schools in San Antonio. And in the meantime, John, my husband, had gone and done a cycling event and came back and said it was just amazing. I can't even describe to you how phenomenal it was. They're always looking for medical volunteers. If you want to be part of it, you want to do some good things, you can volunteer with them. So both of those things came into my life at the same time. And I said, these are the things I want to do. The next event where I could go and volunteer just happened to be during a big chunk of time that I had blocked off from work. And I got this email from this Melissa Aguirre saying, hey, tell me about your story. Tell me what you want to do. And I was looking to start, this was like May, I believed. And I was looking to start in January or whenever the next 200-hour taught. And she said, no, let's be flexible. Let's do this privately, and we can work it around your nighttime nurse schedule and all the things that you got going on in your life. And my big passion is working with the military. And that is exactly who I was going to be volunteering with, is working with veterans and first responders with PTSD on cycling events. And so those things just interconnected so completely. And it was just amazing, absolutely amazing.
One of the things too, because I don't do this anymore, but we used to do the one-on-one teacher trainings, which really allowed for that flexibility, because and honestly, looking back, everybody who trained with me, where it was 7:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. Saturday and Sunday, we had some resilience. I mean, that was the template of teacher training in the market back in the day. So that's why I did that for our cohorts. But even for myself, doing the one-on-one option was always so fun, because you really get to sit and be with people through that process. And I remember, because the yoga philosophy, it really does get you reflecting on these different things within ourselves. And of course, because we're adaptive and we're using props and like making the yoga your practice and coming home to the body. But what happens, I think, for a lot of people, it's like, okay, I'm coming home to the body, but wow, like, why is this so uncomfortable? What are these things that come up?
Well, and you made it such a space of, it's okay. You know, I would have either worked the night before, or it was my first day off. And we're going through the practices. And at that time, my body barely moved, right? Like I would twist to go into triangle, and we'd sit there and we'd play and explore and have fun and talk about it. And I was never made to feel like, really, that's the version that you're expressing in that pose. That never happened. And you and I both know that I've had many events where I've attended a yoga class, and the teacher was less than receptive to my immobility in my body. That was not my experience with you. And then that allowed for that unfolding, which I will tell every single person every time they ask about yoga teacher training, whether they ever want to teach a yoga class ever, it is so incredibly valuable to do a yoga teacher training because of that journey that happens. There was so much releasing, so much growth, so much observation that happened. And we did the 200 privately, but then I went into the group 300, and that same process still happened in that group with that cohort, where, you know, we would go from one moment of laughing like crazy to just everybody in tears crying, because we're just, oh my gosh, yes, exactly. Like that, we can see that version in our own journey, and holy crap, it's hard. But when you get out on the other side of it, there's just this knowing.
I think like what you're speaking, that catches so many people off guard. It's this beautiful piece of yoga teacher training that you literally you don't know what you don't know. So it's like, that's always the piece where I find, like, I love when people explain it that way, because you don't really know what you're getting into. And I think a lot of people enter it with the mindset of like, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to move my body. I'm going to learn these postures, and then I'm going to be adept to go out and teach it. And like, the truth of it is, like, if you've been through it, you know that it's so much bigger. It's so much more vast than that. And that's such a beautiful way of explaining it, Eva, because it's like, it is so true. You're like, yeah, you're laughing, you're having these emotional responses. And it's like, you're learning not only like what is yoga, but you're learning like, who am I in the context of yoga, which is huge.
And I think one of the conferences that you and I went to, Mel, where we had, there was a speaker that talked a lot about the philosophy of yoga, and he talked a lot about the little Y yoga and the big Y yoga. And that was just such it was a very unique presentation. I loved the way that he talked about that, because you do the little Y yoga on the mat, right? Like you're going through the motions of the little Y yoga on the mat, but then you start to get these glimpses of the big Y yoga, where you're using all 8 limbs and you're bringing them all together. that magic starts to happen where you're combining the nervous system, your thoughts, your body, the sensations that you're feeling, and then it informs your choices when you leave the mat.
Yeah, no, it's 1,000% because, and this is why I love the kosha model in yoga, because it's like we go through the body, but that from there, that's how you change the mind, but it's also a way to access the mind. And when we have these experiences of the ands in yoga, the I am soft and strong, right? And we start to do the duality stuff, we begin to notice it in our day-to-day life. And that's when we kind of graduate into that bigger why yoga of, okay, how am I more intentional in my life? How am I flexible and adaptive in my life? How do I hold boundaries and sit in discomfort, but can stay coherent in that process? So it is like the on the mat, off the mat piece. And I think uniquely, because obviously there's a lot of different philosophies and yoga techniques out there. And where I kind of come from, and I know we connect into, is more of that wider scope of, yes, learn the poses and we're doing these practices, but how do we hold space so students are actually supported? And then they can also be guided into that next place of yoga versus you're just coming here to sweat, which those are great too, but it's a lot of times people will kind of start in the fitness realm and then they're going, wait, I'm starting to see these big changes in my life. What now? So the idea is if we can equip our trainees on, well, what do you do when your client goes, love this, this is changing my life, I want more, what can you recommend? Because as yoga teachers, there's so many dimensions we do offer, from meditation, energy work, the sciences of yoga, the philosophies of yoga, different styles. Like, it's a never ending journey for yourself. But I think also finding your home, like when Averie was talking about, like, who am I in the context of all this? And the permission for preference is so starved in our culture. And when we start to give permission of, like, actually, I do prefer this, I prefer this, that's when the artistry happens. That's when we develop the actual craft of presence in our life. So yeah, y'all are spot on. It's an edge. It's magic, but it's like up and down, all around. And I don't think I just think it's yoga does what yoga does in a way.
Well, and just creating that space where, and you touched on this a little bit, where we're asking for consent, but we're also creating that conversation where you're asking yourself, do I give myself permission to do this? Do I give myself permission to explore this? Is now a time where I'm ready and I'm equipped and I feel comfortably uncomfortable and being able to observe this particular pattern in my life or my thoughts, or just, from being able to say, yes, I'm going to move this way in a yoga practice, to embracing this is how I move in a yoga practice. I taught a class the other day and we were in a wide legged, seated wide leg position. And I said, okay, we're going to do a forward fold. And you know me, I lean forward and I'm like, okay, let's move into our forward fold. Come on in. And I said, for the people that are bendy, you're going to keep going. You're going to bring your heart to the ground. And those of you that are like me that aren't bendy and you moved like maybe an inch and a half or something, we're just going to look at each other and smile and go, me too. Made it really funny and lighthearted, not like we're making fun of ourselves, but we're just like, hey, don't stop moving just because your yoga teacher only that's as far as she can move. Like, listen to your body and move as much as it feels comfortable to you. And I had a couple people come up after the class and say, that has never happened in a yoga class before. In fact, I've actually had somebody come up behind me and try to push me further into a forward fold and, make me feel like I'm not trying hard enough when I'm doing it. And immediately I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't, I'm so sorry that happened to you. This is not that space. You are welcome to meet your body where it is, regardless of what your availability is in your body on a typical day. If you feel in one day that, hey, I don't have that normal space that I have, you meet yourself there and say, okay, so why don't I have this normal space? What's going on? What do I need to do? Instead of forcing your body into a position that your body is saying, not today.
Yeah.
And so giving yourself that consent to listen and then make those informed, intentional changes, and that's just gold.
It's the negotiation. I have to, and guys are making me think of like this thing that happened last night because I was a little grumpy last night. Yes, as yoga teachers, we have highs and lows. I was like moody, and I'm like, man, I know exactly what would make me feel better. And sometimes we have this moment where we will resist what we need, right? Because it's like, okay, I know what would make me feel better, but I sometimes the addiction of cortisol in our bodies are like, we can get into that addiction loop. And being the awareness for one that I know that occurred in me is a byproduct of the awareness of when we meet an edge on the mat, of going, ooh, I'm uncomfortable. Being able to negotiate what is actually going to be supportive, and then choosing to meet ourselves there. And I had a moment where I was like, I just want to be grumpy. I mean, that's not exactly what my mind was, but I kind of felt a stickiness to it. And then I finally just was like, okay, I'm grabbing my little red light pad. I'm going to go lay down and listen to this thing I know is going to help me. And it sure enough, like magic, but to get to that place, because I think that for a lot of people, it's like, okay, I may have all these things that support me, but I don't use them when I am feeling that way. But in our yoga practice, when we find those edges and we give ourselves permission to negotiate, we're training that in our nervous system so we can do it in our lives when it happens, because you're human. This stuff doesn't stop. The chaos that is out there. It really helps us actually manage how we respond to it within here.
That's something that I'm trying to bring to the nursing community, because there's such a misconception of what yoga is. And even when we talk about yoga therapy, when I say I'm a yoga therapist, a lot of times people think, oh, well, you're going to make me get on a yoga mat and we're going to have to go through all of these movements. Bringing that quality of yoga into the everyday life to be able to say, okay, I'm working today, I'm on the unit, I'm frustrated as all get out, or something's not going well with my patient and I'm feeling the emotions of it. How do I take that moment and express what I'm feeling and deal with it really quick so that then I can go back and I can be what they need in that moment. I can be supportive to them without what I'm experiencing getting in the way. And I always joke with nurses, whether it's going into the med room and screaming or dropping a bunch of F-bombs, getting in the elevator and just doing a silent scream, whatever it is that you need in that moment, taking that breath where you come out of one patient's room, you take a deep breath, long sigh out, and then walk into the next patient's room. So there's a pivot point, there's a disconnect. You're not carrying what you experienced in one room into the next room.
It's so interesting because to me, like when you're speaking on this, there's multiple points to it, I think, where the first is acknowledging. You have to acknowledge that an emotion or there's a reaction that's about to happen. So whether it's anger, frustration, I think a lot of us, right, if we don't know, if we're not taught, we spiral with it. There becomes this moment where you have to learn to check in and understand. And I think that's what, when we talk about a yoga practice, finding that edge, understanding what it feels like to experience something. And then to two, right, is to cultivate that pause, like you talked about, to recognize, pause, and then choose, right, an action. What can you do in this moment? Whether it's, yeah, scream into a pillow. If you need to go and punch a couch, I mean, I'm full advocate. Like, get it out of the body, scream it out, punch it. Because, like, truthfully, like stress need. Oh well, God, we could go on a tangent, but it's like the outlet has to be there, or right, like Eva said, whether it's a deep breath in and a deep breath out, but it's understanding, like, oh, I give y'all a thumbs up. But it's right. It's those 3 points that I think yoga so powerfully teaches us that when we're able to recognize what's happening in the body, to then say, okay, I've named it. And now to cultivate the pause. And that pause is really, I think, for us to decipher, right? How is the best way to go about this? And then to choose our action from there. But that's such a hard process sometimes if we can't even understand from a body level or an emotional level what is going on.
Yeah,
So,
it's the moving the energy. Like that's kind of the way I look at it. And emotions are just energy and motion, right? So when we don't recognize that emotions are just filters, like our body's response is filtering these emotions or these things that come up. And it could be as simple as just being frustrated because you can't touch your toes. You know, like that can come up in people. But in our day-to-day life, every time we feel an emotional surge, it's the body's natural way. That's why when we cry or when we might make a sound, it's the body's participating to move that energy. And so however we are moving the energy, obviously if we're punching couches, make sure it's gentle and, you know, we're not hurting people. I'm just kidding. But, you know, like when maybe whatever it is, but the reason the physical is so important is because it includes the physical process. And that's why when we don't, more tension just begins to, you know, structure around us and cloud us, you know?
And that's a great, great point because, you know, I love to science the crap out of yoga, right? So if we take that moment where, and the example that I love to use is you're driving on the highway and somebody cuts you off, right? Because everybody's had that moment, right? Where somebody cuts you off and the first thing you do is clench everything. And because you don't know what's going to happen. Am I going to have enough space between us? And the clue to our nervous system is in what happens after that. Do we swear at the person as they're driving off? Do we perseverate on it? And by the time we get to wherever we were going, we're still talking about, oh, that person that cut me off on the highway. Does it continue to poison the rest of our day where it's like, so this is how the rest of my day is going to go. And, you know, we just continue with that. Everything's crappy today. I got cut off on the highway. This happened because that's either a sign that we're letting those things go or we're holding on to them. And the accumulation of that, this is where yoga comes in and one starts to release some of that held on that we've had for maybe decades, changes that process. So then the next time somebody cuts us off, we're just like, oh, well, somebody thinks they're important. And we laugh about it or something. And then we just keep going on with our day. And it doesn't make any difference in our day. And that was one of the big aspects for me where I really started to notice yoga changing not who I was, but how I started to release a lot of the tension in my body, and I started to release the angry version of me, where, you know, I'd walk into a room and a patient's family member would just, you know, be crying, screaming, raging, and instead of going, why are you, you know, look, I'm trying to help. And instead recognize they're scared, they're frustrated, they have no idea what's going on. And I can walk in there and go, I know it's scary. Here, let me translate some of this. Let me tell you the things that are going on. Let me show you some kindness and compassion. And, you know, I'm going to continue to breathe calmly because I know you're not in that space to be able to breathe calmly. So let me create a model for you that I don't know what's going to happen, but we can at least process it together.
Once you're able to be compassionate with yourself, because that's one of the biggest teachings of yoga, right? It's that piece of we cannot truly show up and be compassionate to the others around us if we are not first compassionate with ourselves. And I think that's a big key piece for a lot of people, you know, when they speak to what Eva's speaking to of, I just noticed I was showing up different in my life. And a lot of that is interpersonal as well, right? Where we're like, wow, like I have the patience with my family. I have the understanding that I can sit back and listen better, right? But it's because we've cultivated patience and compassion, right? And listening to our own selves. So it's beautiful how it kind of mirrors, right, our outside experience and how we show up.
And we start to say, what are the resources that I can use in these different situations? And we start to say, okay, who do I need help from in that moment? Or let me ask for directions when I'm lost. Let me ask for assistance to lift this heavy person or heavy object. We start to look for what are the resources that are around us and how can they help us. And just like you were talking about earlier, Mel, having that moment where you recognize you're about to lose your crap, and what are the resources that I know that work for me? I will walk around and I will tap on my sound bowls. I will turn on calming music. I will turn on rage music and start dancing. It's all of the things. One of the things that I have been doing a lot lately is at the end of my shower. I've got one of those shower nozzles that you can remove, and I'll hold it right here and start doing ohms with it. And then I'll infuse the water with Reiki as I'm doing that as well too. And so not only am I getting energy, but I'm releasing vibration, and whatever it is that I'm trying, whatever it is that I need, letting those vibrations and that energy be welcome in my body to either come in or to be released, whatever it is that I need.
It's such a beautiful practice for sensory input and output, right? Like that's a big thing that you're talking to is this sensory management because like I can really relate in the sense of I'm more of a rage, anger, like energy than like I don't get sad. I get pissed, right? Like that's what happens to me. And I usually only cry if I'm really angry and it starts, I lose it. But the thing that I've seen over the years with this stuff is exactly that impulse control and how to deal with sensory overwhelm. And a lot of people don't realize the reason that we're so reactive, it's really sensory overwhelm. Like when we all of a sudden kind of explode on someone or we just react, that sensory overwhelm is because we don't know what to do with that energy. You could call it energy or all that input. The brain can't process it. So that's part of why we're so reactive. But when we are training this in our nervous system and the practices, and even just the self inventory that occurs, it's transformational because then you can be compassionate to yourself. You can go, okay, wait, why am I continuing to do that? I actually don't have to do it that way. Or that thought that's coming up, is that my thought or did someone tell me that and I keep subscribing to that belief? What if I flip it upside down and do something different with that? That's where all the liberation starts to happen. And a lot of those shifts occur somatically because we're starting to deal with all that input.
It's wild because it's like, I love that Eva gives like this beautiful example, right, of using the shower head, infusing, right, the water with Reiki energy and using this as a practice. But it's so cool because like I've asked so many people, and I think it's a really interesting question. Like if you ask somebody like, what do you do to emotionally regulate? Because for all of us, it's so, so different. And that's what's so cool about yoga is because it like kind of opens that door to be like, well, you can explore your body and what works for you. And so, right, how Mel's like, well, I get angry. Like I'm angry. Like when I get overstimulated, I'm like, that's why I said like punch a couch. Like I don't mean go punch a hard part of a couch, but like get that, like, right. But for me, I'm like, when I'm sensed, like I can tell my body is like gonna have that reaction, like I need to move through it. So I'm like, I need hard, right? Heavy contact. And that's what allows me to move through that in the right place and time. But it's like, it's gonna look so different for all of us. I am not somebody who can go and listen to calming music when I'm overstimulated. it's just going to make me more angry in that moment, right? Like it's just, but we know this through trial and error, through like getting really intimate with ourselves and understanding, right? What is it that's working? And what is absolutely not.
I swear though, it's got to be connected to human design stuff
It
too.
has
I
to,
think,
because
yeah.
yeah, anger is our not self. So it's got to be a
And
thing.
I used to, it's for into the contact, holding plank or doing handstand at the wall to push that energy. That's like a button for me to regulate. So like, so, I mean, yes, all of us
It
have buttons.
It probably so is human design related. My daughter's a manifestor and she's a heavy, like she'll walk up and she'll be like, I'm getting so frustrated. I need to go and do something. I'm like, you go scream into that pillow, sister. Let it out. Go see that beanbag chair. You do whatever you need to do, like move it through your body. But yeah, I'll have to try the shower head on my chest because I've never heard that one before. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I just started doing that and then breathing in and exhaling out and that has been a way for me to calm the chaos in my mind and just imagining anything that I'm feeling just washing away with the water.
So I want to just do some fun questions with you, Eva, so we can get, our audience can get to know you a little more, and because I know it's gonna. The first question I want to ask you is if you were to recommend someone to start with one book, and I know this is a really hard one because you're probably like, I have all these books, but like maybe 1 to 3 books you're like, this like my favorite resource for where to get nerdy and go deeper.
Oh, okay. So to get nerdy, it's got to be The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. That is probably one of the best dip your toe into the neuroscience of yoga books ever. And I read it on repeat. I have it on I think I have the physical and then I also listen to it quite often as well too.
So good. Yeah, we love Bessel van der Kolk. And honestly, we can thank him because he's a big pioneer of why yoga is now in more mental health arenas and it's being utilized as an integrative approach.
Oh my gosh, the change in the last 30 years has just been phenomenal in terms of implementing yoga into so many different areas in healthcare, in the mental health world, as well as the allopathic medical world.
All right, Eva, what is your favorite non-yoga related book? Because I find, right, I learn a lot about people through their favorite books. So your favorite non-yoga related book.
Oh gosh. Okay, so it's kind of a toss up between Brene Brown, Braving the Wilderness, and
Yes.
Young Pueblo, Inward.
Ooh.
Um, I absolutely love all things Brene Brown, but I pick up my inward book and I use it. I'll before going into Shavasana, I'll open it up and just, do the whole, okay, what do we need to, well, what does the universe want to tell me? And I'll open it up and just read an excerpt from it. And it is just absolutely amazing.
I love books like that. I'm real right now I'm like that with Emery Hall and her book of
Mm.
poetry. That's another really great one. If you're like, what do I just, especially for women, what do I just need to hear? What is like a divine message? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So I love that.
I also want to ask you when people hear about Reiki, can you kind of explain what Reiki is and tell us more about that side? Because, one thing for those who are not in our trainings, Eva is like queen nerd in the sense of she takes everybody into those deep layers of science and I mean, just phenomenal in that realm. And it's kind of interesting too, because she has this other, like I think all of us at Mel Yoga are very dualistic in interesting ways. But then this whole other realm of understanding energy. And I got to speak to, over the years, witnessing her deepen into this, and she's helped me, she's helped my husband. Like there's been different things over the years that we've done with energy medicine. And just I want to open it up for you to share anything you want to share on that.
Oh my gosh, there is just so much to this. And I have to say, like, being very rigid in science for so long. I was never quite sure what I thought of it. I'm like, I still like, I have my crystals and I'm like, I recognize there's energy, but I didn't understand it. And I've been practicing Reiki on and off for over 20 years. Um, but really deep diving into it in the last 10 and coming to recognize, and I think we're finding this in so many different areas, right? Because in Vedic astrology, right, the blueprint of the stars is imprinted on your body. We're hearing more about mitochondria and how they're the energetic blueprint for your DNA, and having healthy mitochondria, and why is that so important, and all of the areas that influence that. And then learning more about fascia and how fascia is this energetic scaffolding within our body that allows us to move energy, but it's also places where if the fascia is sticky, then that means that there's energy stuck there. And so Reiki is simply just another way for us to tap into the energy that is surrounding us in the trees and the mountains and the birds and all of the things that are around us, and that vital life force energy that we have flowing within us, and being able to tap into that and then allow our body to be in a state where it meets that energy and it loses that resistance to it, so that the energy can go in and bring the body back towards its natural state of higher vibrational movement. By doing that, creating that optimal environment where energy flows and all of the systems within our body are working the way that they are supposed to be working. It's allowing for those energetic blocks to slowly be dissolved and things to be kind of stretched out to the way that they're supposed to be instead of all bunched together.
So what's crazy is I felt the same way initially of like this stuff's and it's funny because Eva's definitely seen me open up over the years, because I think when we did first start working together, I was very much biomechanics and just what is the evidence-based research. And then over time, through being familiarized with some of these other concepts and seeing phenomena in my own life and then the work I do. And one of those was actually with Eva's husband, because I think it was back in, was it 2020 or 2019? It was
2019.
It was, yes, that's right, September of 2019. There was, or it was the summer though, because some symptoms started with him, and we were getting into the sound bowls and doing a bunch of stuff with sound bowls at the studio at the time. And so Eva started taking some of the bowls home and would play every night to help. And I think in the beginning he's like, yeah, whatever, if it works, like he was just like, whatever. And she would play them. And I feel like you should tell the rest of the story, but this is just amazing, wild.
Well, and at the same time, he was presenting with all of these symptoms of decreased strength in his arms and his legs and a lot of pain. It was interrupting his sleep. And he was going in and he was going to the doctors and asking them to look at it, and kept getting these really, like being blown off, basically, where they'd look at him and say, oh, it's just arthritis. And his response was, I've got friends that have had over 250 jumps and they're walking way better than I am. And I've never jumped out of an airplane. So why do I have this arthritis? And yet this is not the norm. You can't just tell me that this is because I was infantry. And so we started looking at what are ways that we can offer assistance. We can offer adjunct therapies to it. So we were really diving into the sound bowl therapy at that time. And so we ran it kind of like as an experiment, where I would take one bowl home at a time, and we would do one chakra, play it every night, and then he would tell me, Did he have less pain during the night? Was he able to get better sleep? And then based off of what he said, then we found that it was throat chakra and sacral chakra. So those are the two that I went and bought those specific bowls. And then we were playing them every night. And if I wasn't there, he was doing it himself. But then we also started including Reiki into the mix, and Nina was helping with that as well too. And so, I was using Reiki on him. She was coming in and practicing Reiki on him, and we would see little tiny improvements where he'd be able to get better sleep or he'd have less pain. It didn't stop the process. And then what was really wild is eventually he did get the MRI of the neck, and they found a meningioma at C2, C3. It was a non-cancerous tumor, but it was the size of a ping pong ball right below the base of the brain, so right below the brain stem. Had it been a little higher or had it grown more, it would have impaired his ability to be able to breathe. And so they did the MRI Thursday night, late at night, and he got a phone call the very next morning saying, get into the ER right now. And so he was teaching at the time and drove to the ER, walks in, and they all just look at him with like these great big huge eyes. And they're all sitting there going, we've seen the MRI and you're standing, you're walking, and he's talking too. And literally, like he walks in and everybody's eyes just bugged out, and he needed to get up to use the restroom, and one nurse practitioner grabbed a hold of him and just very calmly leaned in and whispered to him, if you move and you fall, you're going to break something we can't fix. So stop moving. Like that's how like that was the point that he was at. The surgeon came in and met with him and said, we're going to do the surgery. Recovery is going to be probably at least 8 months. If you get 85% of your strength back, we're going to call it a win. And had some positivity to it, but also a lot of, okay, here's the reality of what to expect. I'm in the room when the surgeon's saying this, and the surgeon walks out, and a friend of ours had been in the hallway, and he comes in and he's like, so what'd the surgeon have to say? And my husband looks at him and goes, oh, doctor said I'll be back to work in 3 weeks. Like, that's not even close to what he said. But the thing was, the surgeon went in that next morning, took out the tumor. It was completely round. It wasn't enmeshed anywhere. And the very next morning, my husband almost kicked the poor little resident in the head when the guy went in to try to do a strength test, because he had almost 90% of his strength back the very next day. He used a cane, I think, for maybe 4 or 5 days. I think the last couple of days basically just to placate all of us. But he was back to work in 3 weeks and had zero residual effects. In fact, the surgeon looked at the MRI a few months later and said, if I didn't know that I had been in there and I had cut that out, he said, I would look at the spine and say that it is completely healthy, has never been touched. There's no scar, there's no anything. And this is the thing where, we can't prove that Reiki and sound therapy had anything to do, because we didn't have a before picture. We don't know what it looked like before. But because we did it so consistently, and it defied what the medical community expected in terms of how he presented his ability to walk and talk and breathe and move. But then also the way that it healed. Yeah. I can't say that it helped, but I also can't say that it didn't.
crazy because that the symptoms started in May of 2019 and the surgery didn't happen till September. So like this was a consistent thing all through the summer, all those months, and just the oddity of how wasn't it like a perfect like the tumor was so perfect in the sense of where it wasn't, you know, risking things, but then it was also like just so clean. And this is where when we talk about vibration and energy and coherence and how, you know, some I don't know if y'all have seen how like sand, when sound, like how the shape sand will make with different sounds and resonance. I think about this stuff for our own bodies and our, you know, the water crystalline inside us and how sound affects us. So again, with John's experience, it's so fascinating because yeah, like, I mean, you can't prove it, right? But I remember at that time we were like, oh, this stuff. And then it just, over the years, there's been, again, a lot of these phenomena I've experienced directly. I know y'all have different experiences as well with the potency of energy, but yeah, I'm a big believer in it. That was insane. That was so awesome.
Well, and that led me to when I had my retinal detachment to use Reiki and meditation in my pre-op setting. And again, you know, post-op, the physician looks at me and says, "What did you do?" Because I've never seen anybody with this little inflammation, this little pain in in the 24-hour appointment. And when I said, you know, this is what I did, she was just kind of like, oh, okay. But that led me to start offering that as a service to people where, you know, okay, again, I can't promise anything. I can't say that it's going to help. It's sure, you know, not going to hurt because Reiki can't do harm. This is just energy. And
Yeah.
so that's a service that I created for people. I suggested it to a nurse friend of mine who's also a Reiki practitioner, and she had a pretty extensive surgery done on her torso. And afterwards, she messaged me and was just like, "Oh my God, I can't believe that worked," because she's like, "I needed next to no pain medicine. I healed really quickly." And she's like, "I don't know why I never thought to do that." But it's just these things, these resources that we have. There's not a lot of research to show the efficacy, and so I think it gets kind of, you know, labeled as woohoo.
It's because it's free. Like to meditate before your surgery, like no one can make profit off of it. So therefore, there's not really money to fund research on this. But I think in the next 10, 15 years, this is something that we're just going to keep pushing and talking about collectively. And I know we do because there's something about pre-opt care and like to do pre-centering stuff before interventions on how things go. Like there's a lot of consistency, and I call it the phenomena, but there's consistency in the phenomena. So it's, you know, keep paying attention to that.
I did not know the story about John though, and that's wild. So I'm just sitting here like, yeah, that's absolutely insane.
It's amazing. I mean, all these inner resources, and I think that this whole conversation really speaks to the importance of proactive wellness and that we can't keep treating these things as just a reactive response or an afterthought, that it really should be in the forefront of all healthcare, all organizational care, and just for us all individually in our lives to use this stuff on the forefront.
There's so many facets to the beauty of yoga, and it's so unique for each individual person. And I really think that's the message of yoga, is that it doesn't have to look like anybody else's journey. It can be whatever it is that you want, whether you're a science geek and you want to make it all science, or whether you're ready to, you know, you want to dive into the energetic portions of it. There's areas of yoga that are available to everybody, and absolutely everybody can do yoga. If you're breathing, you can do yoga. There is a way to make yoga accessible for everybody.
Absolutely. Sing it louder for those in the back. It belongs to all of us. So thank you so much for being here. And Eva teaches regularly in our training programs. You'll see her leading a lot of the workshops. You'll even see her some in the on-demand. And she teaches also in our professional yoga therapy program. So lots of ways to connect with Eva. And you're on Instagram as well. What's your Instagram handle?
It's Eva Z Wellness. So Eva ZEE Wellness.
Amazing. Thank you, Eva, for being here. This was so fun. I feel like we could just keep going and going. There's so many stories too. Honestly, I feel like we got to have you back because there's stories to share. Like so amazing how much this stuff has impacted in so many beautiful ways. So thank you so much for being here, and we'll see
Thank
y'all.
you.
Yeah, we'll see y'all next time.